good evening, everyone who may be joining us today for another episode of Golden Dunkers Live. Today, fortunate to have another guest, Mr. BobMartin, joining us today. Bob, how's everything going today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Life is great these days. I'm enjoying the warmer weather we've had this spring actually, and no major complaints. That's good.
Yes, for sure. Well, thanks for joining us today, Bob. Everyone who may not know, who hasn't tuned into an episode yet, my name is Kendal Shell. So I will be the host today for today's episode of Golden Dunkers Live. Like every episode that we've had, we like to really catch up to a lot of those former Gopher athletes, specifically Gopher basketball players who have really impacted the program, not just on the court, but really use the program as maybe just more so a jumpstart to, I guess, impact their communities as well. So really talking about their basketball careers as well as how they use that just to jumpstart their futures as well. So today we have BobMartin, who is an excellent guest and someone who is a huge testament to that, who's gone through a lot of playing things as well as a lot of things off the court. So I'm excited to hear about that journey here today. So without further ado, I just want to open up things to Bob here. And first, Bob, just for anyone who may not be aware of your journey, kind of where you came from, just talk a little bit about why you're wearing that M on your chest. Really, what made you a Gopher, right? Where are you from, and what got you started here?
Right. So, this is something that I wear with pride. Once a Gopher, always a Gopher. Is how most people look at it. And so any college athlete or student would be that same way. Going back, try to keep it on track, but going back to like 1986, 87, I was getting some recruiting letters. The U of M had just had a big scandal. The coach got out. A couple guys went through the legal process, a big scandal, and Coach Clem Haskins came in. So he was there a couple years, and I ended up signing on with the U of M after visiting. I got, a modest amount, a fair amount of letters just because I was a tall basketball player. Not necessarily, every college offered a scholarship or had a sincere interest, but of course they got to keep their feelers open just in case some of the big recruits they are after, Gerard Mustaf and was one name, Christian Leitner, that was my era. The same age as those guys. Anyway, so I visited Vanderbilt University. I visited Colorado at Boulder back in the fall of '87.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a junior, just started my senior year of high school, and ended up signing after a visit to the U of M. I did a couple of visits, went to some games just because of proximity. I was 30 minutes away. Had the opportunity to go to some football and basketball games. This is part of the normal recruiting process, as you well know. And I liked the U. I really, really, really back then thought, kind of helping turn the program around, whatever that might be, on the bench, off the court, on the court, things like that, would be something cool. Obviously, my parents could get to games. I could go home and do laundry, or have my laundry done occasionally.
Right.
And of course, there's never a bad thing with mom and dad and your family and your support system, people that know you and that you know and are comfortable with, not being too far away. At that point in my life, I wasn't ready to kind of spread my wings and, be a phone call away or a day's drive or a 2-hour flight away. And I was excited about the prospects of joining the U of M. So I started in the fall of '88 after signing before my senior year of high school, which was fall of '87, and did my 4 years stint and had a great time. And as you or any athlete knows, but certainly you, specific to the U of M, Minnesota is a special place. The University of Minnesota is a school to be proud to be from, and obviously to have been able to play a sport there makes it extra special.
For sure. What was that process like? I asked, I guess, coming up, what's that, around '87? You said you graduated high school?
Yeah, I'm old. I've earned this haircut, but yeah, 87. I graduated in the spring of 1988 from high school. Correct.
Yeah, for sure. So
that makes me 50 years old. If for anyone who's trying to get their abacus out or do the math, I'll just cut to the chase. I turned 50 last October, but that's all right.
Oh, well, hey, happy belated to that.
Yeah.
But as far as recruiting and recruitment, where Minnesota was in the mix at that time and what the vibes were as an up and coming athlete in Minnesota? What was recruiting like during that time? I think you talked about the idea of kind of more rebuilding at the time, and I think they were just coming off a new coach getting signed, Clem Haskins, 2 years prior. Really, what was that recruitment like, and what was just the entire vibe of playing basketball, getting recruited like during that time?
So I wasn't sure that I'd be playing basketball at the college level. I'm going to take it back a little bit. I started playing, and there's a story to this, but started playing in 6th grade. I didn't hardly touch a basketball until middle school. I tripped over my feet. I didn't know the rules, didn't know the fundamentals. Really until my sophomore year of high school. I didn't get off the bench as a freshman, barely made the traveling team. And if we were up 20 or down 30, it was like, hey, Martin, get in there. And that was my exposure to basketball outside of practice in the real games. So I started getting letters because I was 6'7" as a sophomore, and I started because the football team had success on the field, and some football players who played basketball were playing in the state tournament and stuff like that. So the football team, some of those guys that were going to play in the basketball team were tied up with football. And so the Paul Trevick, the high school basketball coach, I had grown a couple inches, probably didn't put much weight on. I was about 170 pounds, but he said, we're going to call you up and we're going to kind of get you ready. And you might have, there might be an opportunity for you. So my sophomore year of high school, I started playing basketball on the court after really not having played hardly on the court during an actual game before then. And then I started getting mail. The coach kind of goes to advocate for you. And, recruiting is so much different now the last 20 years than it was 35 years ago.
Right.
But I started getting interest from the U of M and some other schools, a bunch of other schools, probably most of the Big Ten schools. And like I said, Vanderbilt, Colorado, some California schools, Hawaii, Florida, stuff like that. But it was just kind of like, okay, and I saved these letters for a long time. I actually parted with them. It's been probably 10 plus years. But I had like a lot of letters and envelopes and just thought it was kind of cool. And I kind of forgot about them. I didn't save. I thought, maybe kind of cool if I have a family someday to show them. But the recruiting is basically, in-home visits, have the opportunity to do an on-campus visit, meet some of the players, meet some of the academic staff, maybe meet one of the regents or stuff like that. That's what I did at the U of M. Go to class, hang out at a frat party, whatever, just kind of stay out of trouble. It's only a 48 to 72-hour deal, typically on a weekend. It's funny, I was going through some old stuff that I was on the bottom of a barrel, and I came across some of my recruiting letters specifically from the U of M in like a bound folder, just kind of thrown in there. And, the assistant coaches would put these things together. Coach Haskins would sign them, and it's like, whatever. And they're kind of cutting and pasting like out of a letter, like a third grade project. And they would laminate the thing and, say, they'd have all these guys' faces from the media program and, have an outline of a head saying, could this be you? Things like that. I'm sure it's totally different these days with social media. Different access is still restricted at times during the year. But I had a few coaches come to my home and do that visit, meet my parents, have dinner, get to know us as a family a little bit, what we're about, what makes us tick, meet the siblings, things like that. I've got an older sister and a younger brother. And the recruiting was kind of a fun time. And then my sophomore year and then my junior year. But then I committed to the U of M the fall of '87, the fall of my senior year of high school. Okay. And of course, Coach Haskins would still come to the games. This was his third year as a coach. And I had, his second year as a coach. Let me restate that. So he had 1 year with Jim Shikenjansky, Willie Burton, Richard Coffey, Melvin Newbern. Those guys were, they were starting their second year when I was starting my senior year of high school. So I got to know those guys a little bit, see things like after practice in the weight room and go check out some practices. And of course, go to the games and kind of get some of the vibe of Williams Arena as well. But no, the recruiting experience, again, I'm sure it's vastly changed 5 or 10 years after that. And certainly now it's a couple light years beyond that, I would think. At 50 years old, I've got 7-year-old daughter, 5-year-old son, 3-year-old son. So by the time they get to college, it's going to be probably another generation or two from where it is now.
Right.
And but I think I'll be able to help them as far as making decisions if in fact they are so inclined to be recruited by a school for an activity, a sport, or something like that. But
Okay.
it's a fun process, as any athletes. It can be kind of nerve wracking. I will say, one time I heard I got Sports Illustrated magazine, and I was also being recruited. And my mom answered the phone one day during my senior year, and she said, "Bob, it's Sports Illustrated's on the phone." And of course, I was ended up being like an all-state basketball player my senior year.
Yeah.
And of course, I run to the phone, and it's like, "Wow, this is kind of cool." I'm thinking I'm a big deal. And
Uh-huh.
I'm probably not the first person this happened to, but I'd never heard of this before. And I run to the phone and I'm like, "Hey, this is Bob. You're just a 17, 8-year-old kid." And they say, "Hi, this is so-and-so from Sports Illustrated, and your subscription is about to come due." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm thinking they want to highlight me as one of the
And it
people,
was,
do a quick little story, local boy done good.
yeah,
Anyway, it was just to renew a subscription for another 2 years and pay me $8 or $10. So
that's
that
what's up.
that was I've never had a huge ego, but that was a little bit humbling to
Yeah,
have
for
that. But
sure.
that was a funny recollection.
Yeah. How are your kids now? How old are your kids? The kids
So
you
my daughter is 7,
have?
my
Okay.
oldest is 7, and my sons are 5 and 3.5. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Are they all playing sports?
So the two older ones were playing a little bit of soccer a couple years ago. We moved from Phoenix, and they were just kind of getting into it. So for Christmas, fast forward to Christmas 6 months ago, we got all of them basketballs. Dad got an updated basketball, and yeah, so they haven't played any real on court basketball, football, wrestling, anything, volleyball for that matter. But my hope is that they all have a passion and an interest in some type of athletic pursuit. Nothing against the arts, whether it's choir or debate, that's important too. But I really
Yeah.
want to see what they can do. My 3-year-old is about as big as my 5-year-old,
Right.
and so he's a big kid. And I don't know what he'll get into, but yeah, they're a little bit prior to the playing sports. My daughter hopefully will get into some stuff here during the next school year.
That's hilarious. Yeah, we've got that live chat going, of course, like everyone knows. Often looks like we got a few over there. Kevin Ellich asked, "Are you getting those home workouts in?"
I'm getting some home workouts in, push-ups, some plank, a little stretching. I've got a routine that I do, and I know that Kevin, I see him doing some push-ups and flexing those pecs and triceps here and there. That's a good thing. I'm a huge advocate, as we talked briefly earlier, of staying active and keeping your mind engaged, but also you got to work on the other parts of your body, your ticker, your um, yeah, especially being an what I would call an old dad with young kids. I'm getting my workouts in. They're not quite like the gym, and that's
Uh-huh.
to be expected. But trying to just got on my bike for the first time in a few years to
Yeah.
take the kids around a couple of days ago and staying active. So losing a little muscle mass, but my which is not a huge deal. My body weight is the same as it was 2 months ago, and that's I haven't gained was what I have referred to or have seen referred to as the quarantine 15 or the COVID-19 as far as 19 pounds these last couple of months. So that's good.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are subject to that right now.
Yeah.
Uh, for sure, for sure. Well, let's talk a little bit, man, a little more about that Gopher playing career. So I know you played in a time where we had a lot of time that Gopher basketball team. So talk a little bit about not just that transition from a high school basketball player to playing for Clem Haskins, but also just those first few years and really playing for that Gopher basketball team between 1988 into the early 1990s.
Right. So the transition, as anyone who's played the game or anyone who's watched closely from high school to college, academically, athletically, is quite a bit different. I barely lifted weights in high school, so when I graduated, I was 7 feet tall, about 245 pounds. So not a bad weight, but of course it was probably more in my hips and legs, and I needed to develop some upper body strength, and that takes a while. It took a while for me.
Yeah.
I come from my dad was a big guy, 6'10". He passed away almost 10 years ago, 9.5 years ago. But he was a big, imposing guy, and I'm built more like my mom, longer and leaner.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, getting to practice, getting into, and I had 2 surgeries in high school, 2 knee surgeries. I had 2 after college as well. So I got to campus and did whatever running I had to do, and you do what you got to do to get the job done, and you put in the time, as you know, in the library and on the court, and staying up late and all that. But it was a lot different. You know, the sport's a lot faster from high school to college. Players are better. You know, the best players in high school sometimes are the worst players in their college team.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't start. I played like every game, but I didn't start for a few years. That was not a big deal. There were some people above me that were better and stronger, and so you know I had an opportunity to kind of observe and then learn and kind of get my own little flow is the kind of the word, I guess, later on. But yeah, getting your mind right in anything in life is obviously crucial. Starting with a sport like basketball, which they call it a non-contact sport, but certainly,
Right.
as you know, you go in the lane, there's a lot of contact,
Mm-hmm.
elbows and hips, and just kind of get in that mindset of toughening up. And of course, Coach Haskins had the "play hard" on the back of the shorts. Play hard with an exclamation point, and he was all about I won't say any dirty terms, but you getting after it and being hard on us, making us earn our spots, making us learn the position and drill and drill. And of course, it trickled down from Coach Haskins to all the assistant coaches, and that was they all had the different mindset, but he led that way. And of course, with teammates like Willie Burton and Richard Coffey.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily, Richard was 22 or 21 or 22-year-old freshman coming out
Right.
of the Army. Great guys to learn from. I didn't realize at the time. We've had some great memories over the last 25 years of kind of getting together. You see them on Facebook, you see them in person, stuff like that. And, they all have families and whatnot. Now I'm joining the bunch. But yeah, back then it was a big learning curve for me, even as a decently recruited, somewhat talented player, to kind of learn, okay, I need to learn to get stronger up top here, and then my body from my shoulders down to my ankles.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, we had some great times. A lot of those great memories, as you can attest, are off the court. The camera's not rolling.
Yeah.
It's in the locker room. It's training table. It's in the weight room. It's practice. You're working your rear end off. You're trying to improve. You're trying to play hard so other people around you are improving. Your
Mm-hmm.
teammates, because when they get called into the action, I didn't start for a couple of years. Not a big deal. But I had to play hard to push the starters to do better. And of course, if they did better and we could get a lead, that would give me time to play. Looking back, but no, great memories. We turned Coach Haskins' first 2 years. They won 9 games the first year, 10 games the second year, just by a function of time and that core gelling. And then myself, Kelvin Hammonds, and Junior Graves were the freshmen the fall of '98. We got in there and started to add to what was already coming together as a unit, and had unexpected success. I wouldn't necessarily say unparalleled. Other teams have done more. But
Mm-hmm.
from where we came, winning 19 games over the course of 2 seasons, having long losing streaks, and just kind of being, not filling the stands, things changed. My freshman year, again, I'm taking zero credit for it. It's all coaching and the collective team. But yeah, that was a fun time, and we ended up. I think we won 19. We went 19-12 my freshman year. Went to the Sweet 16 my freshman year in
Yeah.
March Madness, a great event.
Okay.
In my sophomore year, we were 23-8, and we were kind of flirted with a top 5, top 10 ranking a few times during the year. Had some huge wins at home, some big wins in the court, and of course, we had some big defeats that we wouldn't have foreseen in those 2 seasons as well. But yeah, going to the Elite Eight, and literally, um, I'll call it a screw job from the officials. We played Georgia Tech in the Louisiana Superdome, so we were kind of in their territory. 2 ACC officials, 1 quote unquote neutral official, and we lost 93-91. I'm sure anyone else you've talked about from my era has told you about that. But yeah, just great guys, great
Yeah.
memories, and
Yeah. We had
just phenomenal. Yeah.
someone ask about that. Johnny Mulkern. He asked, "Do you stay in contact with those teammates?" I think you maybe alluded to that a little bit more. But if you do stay in contact, even for my knowledge and maybe for some of my fellow teammates, how do you guys stay in contact, and what's the best way you guys stay in contact?
Yeah, well, certainly with the social media thing that's not going away. I'm on Instagram and I do Facebook, and so that's where I see these guys. Some of them I see in person now and then. It's never real frequent. I mean, we're all busy with work or family, but if it's a priority, obviously we've had a few things, we've made it happen, and it's just a great thing. Typically, it's at Williams Arena.
Right.
And we get together for some type of event or related to the program and bringing back former players. So that's how we've gotten together. And but otherwise through social media, some people are on there more often than others. I happen to be on there fairly frequently,
Yeah.
which is not a bad. And some guys are on there, don't post a whole lot, and some guys aren't on there at all, or maybe not connected with them. But that's pretty much what it is. It's good in getting on there and just kind of checking it out. It's great to see and share, pics of what you're up to, family.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes you private message somebody to say, "Hey, congrats on whatever," or "I'm sorry to hear about something else," things like that. But yeah, unfortunately, because we're all so busy, and that speaks for anyone on
Yeah.
the planet for the most part, certainly in the U.S., it's just hard to make it the priority that it probably should be. And I'll probably be one of those guys that when I'm 75 years old, I look back and say, man, I should have done more stuff with my teammates, but it would have come now at the cost of spending time, most likely, with my wife and my young kids. So it's having that balance and trying to, but I've taken them to a couple of games. They've met Coach Patino a couple of times, and been close to the court and been on the court, not during a game or during a halftime or anything like that. But it's fun to share that and take pictures. And looking back in 5 or 10 or 15, 20 years, we'll have those memories, and of course the pictures to kind of say, hey, you visited, this is where Dad played basketball. And they'll be hopefully able to kind of appreciate that.
For sure. Piggybacking off of you playing basketball there, what are your thoughts about the barn and playing in the barn? How was that? How was that experience? Everybody has their own experience. Everyone knows it's
Right.
a big place to play.
Yeah. So the elevated floor, it's about 2.5 feet, roughly, on all sides. That kind of freaks out a lot of people because we had the advantage of practicing there and knowing that most players, unless you're somebody who's really rambunctious or out of control and might dive into the first row stands, most players, there's probably, I don't know if it's 10 feet or 8 or 10 feet, but there's enough room on all sides of the court where you're not likely to run off the court.
Right.
That's just the way that it is. It happens sometimes in practice, but really it didn't. But it became, it was an advantage, right, and is an advantage because there's, teams are there once a year. There might be, players that are there if they stick around until their senior year, 4 times in their life, they play basketball in that court. We're there 7 times a week during the season practicing, sometimes 2 days for preseason. So you kind of get used to it, and you kind of know where the dead spots are. Like, there's, dead spots over in certain areas. I wasn't a ball handler, but, sometimes there are dead spots, and little things like that can kind of work to your advantage. It has wooden benches. I mean, I'm sure anyone seeing this that cares knows about it, but, back then it was all wooden benches. There was no real material, soft stuff, trophy, banners, a few banners up top, but there was really not a whole lot of noise. I think it was built in like 1919. It really hasn't changed. The outside is about the same. Now, of course, they made some nice improvements 20 years ago with the locker room and expanding things and doing stuff with Mariucci to make that, for wrestling and volleyball, and getting the, Ritter Arena for whatever. So to kind of diversify, but they really made it more special, and kind of cater to it. But that was part of what we were there for, was to kind of rebuild the program. We had this little dinky locker room for 4 years. And of course, it was probably there for 80 years before that. Or 60 years before that. And, I don't know if you ever, no, you wouldn't have been there, but, there used to be a tunnel going over to what was then Met Stadium, underneath University Avenue. When you're walking through there, and it's about, 6'8", so it's like I got to duck for like 100 yards walking through this thing. And these things, there's like boilers and stuff like that. And you get over there, and there's a weight room with, rat turds and just torn up equipment, because the stuff was probably original to 1919. Of course, they tore the stadium down and that thing went away, but just cool memories of that. Just a big old bathroom without any walls in it, except, there's, half a dozen toilets with no walls. It was like primarily a locker room for hockey players or a weight room, but just an old dingy room that had a couple of light bulbs, like Thomas Edison light bulbs, it seemed like, as I recall. Maybe I'm embellishing a little bit, but that whole vibe, that weight room, the the Spartan aspect, just old, outdated, but it's still relevant today with some technological enhancements. But it's still the same place, save for some of the seats have backs. They've got more defined student sections and this and that, and maybe a couple coats of paint on there, a new floor. I figured it was about 10, 12 years ago. Things like that to remove probably some of the dead spots. But I was able to purchase a couple chunks of the floor and get like some little memorabilia.
Oh yeah.
Anyone had that chance to do that, but I purchased a couple of those, and yeah, just a great memory. It wasn't like it was all posh and like you'd go to Michigan and use them as an example. Michigan, it's like all these nice seats, and the team was successful for the most part. Obviously, won the championship, and I think it was '89. But it's like it was never loud in there. And as a home team, here and there, but it's like the fans. It's like they expected so much when I was there, and since then, largely, it's like you got to play hard. You got to get out there, and the coaches take a lot of heat in the media, and the players. I know they're working hard, and sometimes this doesn't come together. But the barn collectively, when it's loud in there, it's got to be one of the loudest arenas in the country for basketball, just because of the way that it's designed. And like I said, it doesn't have a lot of sound panels and soft coating, soft textures to keep the noise, screaming, booing, yelling, whatever, from kind of ricocheting off of the ceiling or the walls or the benches and the seating.
Yeah, it gets so loud there, and when it gets to its loudest point, it's rocking and highest of any of the arenas out there that I played. And obviously the Indianas and Michigan States are pretty rowdy, but it's pretty crazy during that time. And during that time, and kind of going off of that, playing during that time, playing in that Big Ten, playing in that era of the Big Ten. Just talk a little bit about that. I mean, you guys had a really strong team. Right. And I think the run that you made in the tournament always alludes to how strong your conference was and battling in the conference and with your team. Talk a little bit just about the strength of the Big Ten during that time and kind of where it was in comparison to others in the country.
Right. Well, the Big Ten was, from what I recall, pretty much, in my experience, pretty much kind of like a big, there's typically a big white guy as a center, and then some athletic guards and stuff like that, but just kind of big plotting people.
Yeah.
It's changed. Basketball has changed at the high school, college, and elementary, and certainly the pro level. But back in the late '80s, early '90s, had some success my first couple of years, and that confidence, carried into my junior and senior year. But we didn't make it to the NCAA tournament my last 2 years. We lost a lot of talent, and it just wasn't. Maybe I was a poor leader for that matter. But it was. We had some big Mike Poplawski, Bill Robinson. Mike Poplawski, played in the NBA. He was at Michigan State. There were some big guys in the league, but they were all like, back to the basket, classic type players. Now, you got players out there, as I've observed the last 15, 20 years, and anyone has seen this, you got some, 6'8" to 7'2" guys out there shooting threes or shooting, jumpers from the key outside the paint. But back then it was like, catch the ball and Bob, post up, Bob, post up. Not that doesn't happen now, but it's just a lot more athleticism, and you see that. I don't know what your experience was watching basketball back in 30 years ago. You probably didn't pay much attention to it by virtue of your age, so you didn't see some of that unless you watched like some of the black and white footage. But it was very, the center was a center, and he didn't go more than 3 feet from the basket, and if he did, it was more maybe 5 feet from the basket, and that was me. Played defense, and the guy he was guarding, he was unless there was a switch and it was a bad matchup, there was never a situation where I was out there, slapping the floor and getting down in it like any coach would want, and trying to stay in front of a guy who might dribble past me. The other center just didn't do that. Right. Because that wasn't their skill set, and basketball hadn't evolved. It's amazing. It's like it's a generation or two from a talent standpoint from where it was. But yeah, some great. Jimmy Jackson played against him a couple years at Ohio State. Chris Gent at Ohio State. AC Earl, big 7'1" guy from Iowa. Poplawski at Michigan State. Michigan had Glenn Robinson for a couple of years. Loy Vaught, Terry Mills. I mean, great talent and great teams and pretty solid coaching as well. So, the talent's always going to be in the big leagues. When I compare it from my memory to like the ACC, I think you always thought the ACC was kind of quicker, a little higher scoring. It wasn't like 62 to 55. It was like 84 to 78 as a score, and that's one example fixed up here. But yeah, it just seems like the scores in the Big Ten were a little lower scoring, generally speaking, because it took longer for the big center to get up and down the court. And the ACC and some of the Big East was kind of a big bruising league. But there was some athleticism out there with Syracuse and some of the other schools. But yeah, it's just great to see. It's and obviously I was there for 1 year playing against the Fab Five at Michigan, and they kind of helped. I mean, I've watched the Fab Five. I think it was the ESPN thing a couple of years ago. I was there during that time, so I had nothing to do with it, but I was like right there, like, oh my gosh, what's going, this is, the shorts became less tight. They were baggier shorts and black socks. And that documentary, for anyone that hasn't seen it, it really hit home because I was watching that and like recalling some of these memories that you're asking about, and that I may be bringing up. It really brought me back to, man, that was, that's part of my past. Now, it's not a big deal. It's not like I, have a feather in my cap, but it's just kind of a cool thing to have experienced that and to be on the court with that generation and the generation that was like, they changed basketball. And that was my senior year of basketball. And seeing all the fanfare that they got for a couple of years before they kind of split up, and of course, watching NBA careers and whatnot. But yeah, things kind of changed to in my eyes a little bit with like the Big Ten, with some of the style of play being a little more okay in basketball in general. It started to get more to, you're getting 6 to 8 guys kind of stepping out to the short corner, being more athletic, and excuse me, having less opportunity for an unskilled player who's 5 feet from the basket, me basically. Probably not that I would have gotten eaten up because I worked hard, but yeah, it was just the game kind of was transitioning a little bit, and like I said, the baggy shorts, the black socks, all that stuff became the rage over the next couple of years because of that team in 1990 or 1991, 92, I should say. The Fab Five.
1991, yeah, for sure. How was that around that time in the Big Ten, or just around that time in basketball? Was that, would you say they were probably the most popular team around basketball, college basketball at that time? Even comparison to like the Dukes of that age and things like that. Was the hype really there for the Fab Five during that time?
Well, I don't think I'm embellishing when I say it was a pretty big deal. If you watch that, for anyone that's watching that hasn't seen it, the Fab Five, whatever, hour and a half show, whatever it was, documentary.
Yeah, 30
that, taking old clips and taking, the meetings that they had with Duke and playing them. I was just there 1 year for that, but I remember, after that, kind of seeing them play from the comfort of my couch for a couple of years. But yeah, Duke has been a powerhouse for 30, probably since we played them in the NCAA tournament in 1989 and lost out in New Jersey. It was a heartbreaking loss, but as any loss is, particularly when it ends your season. But Duke with Danny Ferry, Christian Laettner was a freshman. That they were just coming around like the previous couple of years that I can recall. I don't remember them being like real big, like in 83 or 84 or 85 or 86.
Yeah.
But yeah, Duke, NC State, some of these teams were, that aren't really relevant now. And I don't watch a ton of basketball just because I'm busy with other stuff. I've got more things to divert my attention. But yeah, I would say Michigan, Duke, they've always kind of been relevant in my, since I've been paying attention to basketball, from like 1986 to 87.
For sure. During that time, let's talk a little bit more about that Gopher squad. So that's one of the most talented, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-man rotations in Gopher basketball history. You hear about them all the time when I'm there. Those years, even competing your early years when you have the likes of a Willie Burton and a Richard Coffey down low that you're battling with every day. Then you have guards out there as well. Kevin Lynch is, I think, during that time. Who knows?
Yes.
Rio Greens. Shoot, who else? Walter Bonds, all those types of players you had at that time. Talk a little bit about those practices. I mean, for me, I know my freshman year, our team with Trevor Mbakwe, Rodney Williams, like those practices were competitive. Like we went at each other. We had Tubby as our coach, right? Even probably a lot similar old school style to a Clem Haskins. So I know there is probably a lot of Clem and a lot of the talent there. Talk a little bit about those practices, maybe some things that you recall and battling all those times.
Well, certainly, Clem played 9 years in the NBA. I think it was 9 years. And he was a hard-nosed guy. He put up with a lot of stuff before he got to college. And, being an African-American, playing in Kentucky and stuff like that. So he kind of, he had a chip on his shoulder in college and then getting into the pros, I'm sure. I never saw him play, watched some old black and white footage. Just a great guy. I love that guy. But and his wife, Yvette. But he took that chip on his shoulder and he put it onto our shoulder. He was a dad, like a father figure for a lot of players. He instilled in us a work ethic, and most people had that, but if they didn't, they kind of learned real quick. Okay, if I'm going to make something of myself, and kind of get your psychology to think, okay, I need to play hard because, like I mentioned before, it's going to make me better, and the better I am, it's going to make the other guys around me better. Collectively, that's going to raise the ship, or it's going to make all of us better as a team. And it took a while, but he had time. So practices were hard. I'm not sure how Tubby did it. I went to a couple of practices back when he was there, watched some of the teams, but there were some fights, and coach would say, okay, if you guys want to mess around and not play, let's put on the gloves. Let's go. So there'd be fights that would break out. And again, that's not unique to U of M basketball. That probably happens, 5 times a year at any NAIA Division 2, 3, 4, 6, certainly Division 1, football, wrestling. But knowing what I know,
boxer on the team.
What's that?
Who's the best boxer on the team?
I don't know if there's. I know Jason Walton got into a couple of scraps. Nate Tubbs had a chip in his shoulder. Nate were both a couple years younger than me. Walter and Walter was a big, sturdy guy. Richard, obviously being a couple years older as a freshman. Now, when I got there, he was a junior, and he's probably, I don't know if he was 30 years old, or maybe he was more like Richard, if you're watching. I love you, Lefty. But he's probably 24 years old. And he was a man. I mean, he was 24.
I've seen pictures of him, so I can imagine.
What's that?
I've seen pictures of Richard Coffey back in college, so I can imagine he's probably
just lean, and he was strong, and he was strong. But part of it's the strength you have, and part of it's the mental resolve. Some guys came from Chicago, Detroit. You look at like Connell and Mario came from the Bahamas. You can have it. You don't have to be super strong, but you can have a bad attitude and be a very skilled player in developing. So it's like, man, I'm gonna, those type of guys don't back down.
Right.
So it's like you want to fight somebody who's really strong but may not know how to fight, or somebody who knows how to fight but may not be the strongest. That guy with a chip on his shoulder. You might want to, So we didn't see that a ton. There weren't a whole lot of long out fights, but sometimes coach would say, let them fight, let them go, until they get to the ground, like in hockey for that matter. And then you kind of get in there and you kind of pull them apart and whatnot. And then there's a little bad blood, maybe for, until that evening. And then, hey, your apologies. I didn't get in any fights. There was elbows and stuff like that, but nothing that ever came to blows. And that wasn't necessarily a calculated decision. Either somebody didn't want to, try to match my reach as I go toward the camera, or they thought, well, I don't want to kick this guy's rear end. So I appreciate that, but I wasn't necessarily equipped physically, and mentally didn't have that mindset back then. Not that I do now, but now that I've got kids and a wife, it's like, I'm prepared to, do, I think, what would happen if ever it got to that. But no, physical, like I said, play hard in the back of your shorts. That gets imprinted in your brain. And
when you say the back of your shorts, was that on your practice shorts then?
Oh yeah, it's on your rear end and your practice shorts. Yep.
Okay.
I said play hard and with an exclamation point.
Maybe Coach Patino needs to do that. I know a few times this year I want them to go a little harder.
Yeah, and one quick story. So every year, certainly Tubby, Coach Patino, any coach tells stories, and Coach would a couple times during the year. Well, one like at beginning of the year, he kind of set the tone, and I'll give you the abbreviated, clean version. He wanted us to be tough, and tough players are gonna, he wanted tough guys in this case, being a men's team, tough guys that wouldn't quit and kind of developing their mind. And he would tell the story, certainly a parable, if nothing else, that he goes, man, he goes, if you ever see me in the woods and you see a bear attacking me, he says, you better help that bleeping bear because I'm going to kick its rear end. That's the clean version of. So his mindset was, obviously, if you see a bear attacking a person, you go, you try to distract the bear, you go save your friend or the stranger or the coach, whatever. But his mindset was, no, you go help the bear because I'm going to kick its rear end. It's not going to kick my end. That's how feisty. That's how mean. And he was very, very, very intense. Now the endearing thing a few times here and there was that he would, you'd catch him like laughing or smiling, like in pregame. Not necessarily during a game, certainly not during a timeout, but pregame he'd be talking about this stuff, and then he would like let out a little bit of laughter and kind of like break the intensity of the room a little bit because he couldn't keep a straight face sometimes. But his story about it's during the practice season and sometimes during the game, he would yell out, "Help the bear! Help the bleeping bear!" Because that was a trigger to back when he said, what does help the bear mean? Nobody knows that unless you've heard the story, which we've all heard a number of times. Help the bear means have the mentality of just be hard. It's rear ends and elbows, and just go out there and fight. Represent your family, certainly represent your team and your university, and give it all you got. Don't leave anything on the court. Don't finish the game, whether you win or lose, saying, man, I could have worked a little bit harder. That maybe would have made a difference. Certainly if you're on the losing end, that's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing that you could have worked harder. So don't get outworked, basically, was his mindset or mantra. And that was what made him successful as a high school and then college and then taking him to the NBA. You're just a gritty person, a gritty personality, and a gritty man, for that matter.
For sure. So for us, during my time, 2011 to 2015, we were able to come away with the NIT championship. Really one of our most fondest memories, even though it wasn't a championship, was the NCAA tournament. And then we won the first game, came out with UCLA. And I know your team was very successful your first couple of years. Like you said, you played in a Sweet 16 as well as playing in an Elite 8. I think that's something that is huge. That's huge for any program, for guys like myself to say that we have former alumni that played at that level. Talk a little bit just one about that run. I know when you're in it, it's really hard to really understand where you're at. Obviously playing, everything's happening so fast. With you guys, you made 2 runs within 4 years. So just talk a little bit about, one, that run, and 2, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I don't know if anyone thinks they're going to make it to the Elite 8, but I'm sure you surprised a few people going throughout that. So talk a little bit also about that team's mindset during that time and making that run. Was it a surprise for you guys? Was it more of let's show everybody? Just give a little more glimpse into that run, that Sweet 16, as well as that Elite 8 run.
Right. So I might get some of the details mixed up a little bit, but obviously we won a couple games, and then the season ended with a defeat. Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech was my sophomore year. Duke was the year prior, my freshman year. But no, it just, the fanfare leading up to that, because people, I don't think, expected that. Win 9 games in 1986, 87, win 10 games, 87, 88. And then, again, I happened to stumble on campus with a couple other freshmen, didn't play that much. But 87, 88, 89, my freshman year, the Sweet 16 year, and the following year, 89, 90, went to the Elite 8, just to recap that. So I don't think the local media, the national media, certainly, we weren't on anyone's radar screen. But, again, Coach Haskins and his staff had put together a collection of players and drilled. And there was a time I went to a game, I believe it was Austin P that the team lost to, and they practiced after the game. They were watching tape, and it was like, midnight, get the balls out, get the practice shirts. And it's like, what the heck? No, I wasn't there. I was a high school guy at that time. But it's like, the practice until 2 a.m. because he didn't like what he saw on the film, and look at the stat sheet, and he'd tear things up and eat them and stuff like that. So getting to the as the Big Ten, have some success in the fall of '88, which was my freshman year, and all of a sudden we start making a little noise in the first part of the Big Ten season. It's like, hey, maybe we got a chance to do something. And all of a sudden, we make we break the top 25 in the national rankings for like the AP and whatnot, and have a couple of big wins, and we kind of keep going up there. And then we, as most teams still do, we get together over at Bierman when they announce the March Madness selection Sunday, and we're all like, waiting to find out. We think we got in, but we just weren't sure. We had a decent ranking. We beat some good teams. We had a couple losses, but we came from a 10-win season the year before. That team I wasn't part of. I watched it as a fan, and just the excitement of, oh my gosh, we made the tournament. We have a chance to do something, win a few more games, make a ton of memories. And of course, you take it day by day, but you look at your matchup. I think we played Kansas. Was it Kansas State? This is where the details are a little bit sketchy.
Yeah.
But Kansas State or Siena. But anyway, so we won a couple games, then lost. And just, going to the arena and practicing and getting a watch and stuff like that, having it, my name on there and getting having those memories is huge. But getting that experience with the guys, thus the memories, I think of things here or there, and I don't think about it a whole lot. But when we get together, naturally, as you certainly do, some great memories there too. You talk about stuff. You talk about funny stuff and heartbreaking stuff and different memories. And how about this? And some of them are not necessarily Facebook Live appropriate, and some of them are like, kind of keep that within the team. But that's just how sports are. But just seeing like the fans that were excited for us, and as we started to kind of get people in the barn, and of course they'd go to the airport and cheer us on and hold signs and greet us. And this is back 30 years ago when you could not have a ticket, you could walk to the darn gate because there's no security, there's no TSA. You just kind of walk in there. It's like, hey, I'm just going to go for a walk at the airport. I'm going to walk to the gate and whatnot. So it was totally different back then. But getting all the fanfare and seeing the bowels of different arenas was kind of cool as well. Winning some games, that's one of the more cool things. And having those memories with 14, 15 guys, the coaching staff, and a couple of trainers and cheerleaders and whatnot. And of course the brass back at the farm as far as the U of M. A couple years of that stuff was pretty awesome. And of course, playing in the Louisiana Superdome and losing, like I said, to we lost by 2 points. We had a 3-pointer. You mentioned Kevin Lynch. Had an off-balance 3-pointer at the end which would have won the game for us. And we shot like 12. I think we were like 8 for 12 from the free throw line, or maybe it was 5 for 10. I forget. And they were like 35 free throws. There were 2 ACC officials. That was an uphill climb, being kind of in their territory in Louisiana, certainly deep south. Officials weren't the most impartial. Our Willie Burton didn't shoot a darn free throw, and he was like, he's like 30 some points. He didn't shoot one free throw the whole game. So, I think that not that the fix was in, but we weren't treated as objectively as players as we would hope. And we had a chance to win. We didn't. That's a bitter memory. It doesn't bother me now, but it was a tough pill to swallow, knowing that this end of the season, I've got great memories with these guys. I've got 2 years to go, but these guys that kind of brought this nucleus together, they're done. They may go to the NBA, they may finish school, maybe they, whatever. But they can't do this anymore. They've exhausted their eligibility. What am I going to do? Not that it's about me, never was, but what's going to happen now? Because these friends of mine, Facebook wasn't around. It's like, hopefully I get your, we don't have cell phones,
right?
Hopefully see these guys around campus a little bit, or if they had to go back and take a class. But the basketball specific stuff that you ask about, and the memories of getting selected into the tournament, having a couple of wins, and playing a second weekend, almost playing a third weekend, being a shot away from going to the Final Four, and the excitement and all that kind of stuff. It's outside of the birth of my 3 little kids, those are like memories. And of course, my kids are a lot younger than that. Those are memories from 31 years ago that I can still recall so vividly. And it's heartwarming, and that's why it makes it so cool to kind of still get together and communicate with the guys, but to actually get together and see the camaraderie. And when we get the coaches involved as well. Doesn't happen that often, but just great memories and stuff that it's fun to look back on, see some pictures here and there, and of course, just it doesn't have to be posted on Facebook. Just knowing that, man, I'm really blessed to have my health, to have these memories, because I didn't have, not a lot of people have the chance to maybe go to college or play a sport that they love, or play it at a high level, and have the relationships. So that I'm not sure if I answered your question. I certainly talked a lot, but yeah, just tremendous memories. And your experience probably no different. You go to the NCAA tournament, you win the NAT championship. That's special. You get the extra games in. It's fun, but it's like, man, you look back at that, and it's better than the proverbial kick in the teeth, or not going to the tournament. Nobody wants to go home unless you win some hardware. It's always a tough thing, but we didn't win any hardware, but we've got memories that I really wouldn't trade them for anything.
For sure, yeah, it definitely becomes a brotherhood. It's a brotherhood thing, and when you're an athlete, you understand that. And schools like it promoted the Dukes of the world. Now they promote it all the time, but every school has that. Like, no matter what, that's what it is. It becomes a brotherhood, and you don't even realize, I think, until time goes by more and more and more, and then you marinate on those memories a little more, and then they become even more fond, as well as just what you talk about, that fanfare and that support. Even during our run, when you start to see that, obviously TSA was heightened a little bit. They weren't at gates and terminals, but the support was there, whether it was virtually, whether it was them there. You even saw that these last few years, as we've seen a lot of success with the Gopher football team, and how the city and the state has really surrounded and pushed them. And that's something that's special. And that's the type of stuff, you need future people who's coming, future athletes, future recruits, future players. They can see that, because it does become a brotherhood, and you do feel the ultimate amount of support. There's no competing around here. It's not like Michigan and Michigan State. There's Minnesota. That's where we are. We're all Gophers here, and that's how it is. But yeah, let's get a little more basketball specific before we wrap things up soon here. But let's talk a little bit about just hoops in general, about your playing, the style of play during that time, and then even what you've seen now. I know you said you don't watch too much basketball now, but as you alluded to earlier, the game's changed a little bit. So you were a guy, correct me if I'm wrong, you're listed at 7 foot, correct? 7 foot center. So you were the 7 foot center growing up, growing up looking up to guys like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar even, and then playing more so in the era of a Hakeem Olajuwon, a Patrick Ewing, Ralph Sampson, players like that. Then you look at guys now, basketball-wise, a little bit different, right? Even our guy in our own backyard, Karl Anthony Towns. I think he attempted over 100 threes last year. We have 7-footers like Dirk Nowitzki, guys like that. Talk a little bit about just that change of the big man. It's a new era we're playing in. There's the 90s center, I like to call it, especially with this whole Michael Jordan documentary stuff. A lot of talk with that versus today's center. And like you talked about, not even really moving away from the basket a little bit. I want you to talk about some of the biggest differences you see, as well as really the evolution. Do you feel it's something you think centers need to maybe put their back to the basket more, or do you wish you were in this era where you were getting up about 5 or 6 threes a game? Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I never practiced, 3-pointers in high school or in college. I might practice them, but it was like, Bob, what the heck are you doing that far away from the basket? You need to be within 5 feet of the basket. Baby hook left, baby hook right, stuff like that. Finger roll, dunk, whatever. So one example I'm going to point out. Now, Dave Holmgren played at basketball at the U of M, 6'11", played on Prior Lake. But yeah, I'm not sure if you know Dave. So he played for 3 or 4 years at the U of M. I didn't play with him. So Dave has a son, Chet, who I've never met. Chet is 7 feet tall, and he's probably 190 pounds, but he's highly skilled. This guy is probably going to go to the NBA after his first year of college. Now, I think he's only going to be his junior or senior next year, but he's ranked very, very high, and he's a tall, skinny white guy. He was me minus about 40 pounds or maybe 30 pounds as a senior in high school. His skill set is about 118 times more than mine was. He can probably do back to the basket, but he can dribble between his legs. He's got a sweet, nice jump shot, nice soft touch, 3-pointers, not a problem. And I've only seen, highlights. So I don't know if he's, if I see 3 highlights, maybe they're picked from, 3 random plays, or maybe it's 3 selected plays. I have no idea. I just know that I've read about him a little bit, seen some video, and it's like, man, how does this guy not get pushed around? But you can learn to work with your body. I didn't have that. Dave played basketball, and it's probably, there's so much more coaching. AAU, that is such a big deal the last 25 years. When I was around, my dad, he'd go to work and he weighed 400 and some pounds, and I just didn't play basketball. I stumbled into it. And then, so I got a late start, and this is not a complaint. It's just my experience. That's my reality. And I accept that. But I'm hopeful that there's more athleticism and there's less back to the basket as far as a limiting factor. I don't mind back to the basket. You can post up Steph Curry, post up anyone. I think that's an important skill to have, because sometimes there are mismatches and whatnot. But it's fun to watch the footwork on the perimeter, and it's certainly fun to watch some of the the Kevin McHale up and under things that you don't see that often, or an up and under by Kevin McHale, a skyhook by Kareem. Those are like legendary things that nobody's doing. Nobody's doing a skyhook. Up and unders, you might see them here and there. It's all flash and stuff like that, because the guys, the rim is still 10 feet high, the ball is still 9 inches across. All the dimensions are the same. The players are just becoming more athletic. And even the big players. So as little as I watch it, I don't necessarily miss the the solely back to the basket lane clogger type guys by any stretch. But I just think that the game started to evolve with some of Chris Webber, one of the Fab Five, 6'9", pretty solid build on him as a freshman in high school. And he was out there, very athletic. Juwan Howard, not quite as athletic, but still very, 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 very skilled. Yeah. 6'10", 6'11". These guys were freshmen, and they were doing damage against guys that were older than them. And I think people started to and then AAU got to be a bigger deal. Around the late 80s, the early 90s, it wasn't really there when I was there. I didn't play traveling except for my freshman year, which I was there just because I probably sold a few candy bars and, earned enough to get a jersey, but I didn't play. I wasn't that good. But no, I'm a big advocate or proponent for watching just guys. I don't want to say roll out the ball. I like seeing, the Princeton backdoor cuts and some of the fundamental basketball stuff. I certainly appreciate a good back to the basket player who can kind of, feel the defender's body and do whatever footwork and head fake wise. But I like watching the LeBron James, the classic Michael Jordan stuff. There's so many guys, watching the handles of Kyrie Irving and Steph Curry, Rajon Rondo. Those guys can handle the ball, and it's amazing. Now they're guards, so it's to be expected. If they couldn't, then they're not going to do a whole lot unless they're really, really good free throw shooters. But no, I just think that there's just a lot more athleticism at all height levels. And it's going down to the elementary school and certainly middle school, and people are starting earlier and they're having becoming specialists. It's a year-round sport now.
For sure.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's different. It's definitely different right now. Well, yeah, you talk about kind of that time in your era and that back to the basket big man. Just talk a little bit about playing. So you played with the Clippers. I think it was first 3 you played with in the NBA when you made it to the league. So just talk a little bit more about that stint and what that grind was like. To make it to the league is a tough thing for anyone to play and to get minutes in the NBA. So just talk a little bit about that grind mentally, competing against the best athletes in the world out in Los Angeles during that time in the 90s NBA, which is arguably when the NBA took a turn into being really one of the most popular leagues in the world.
Right. So no, great question. So I was not drafted. I didn't have the the benefit of being drafted, but I did. So the reverse is I did have the benefit of getting an agent because I wanted to continue to play, just to expire what I could and then go back and get a regular job. So I found an agent, and I had the opportunity to work with an agent to find maybe like the right fit, which is probably better than being drafted in the second round. The NBA went to from like 6 or 8 rounds to 2 rounds, maybe 3 rounds back then. but I went to I went down to Phoenix, tried out for the Suns the fall of '92, and Charles Barkley was there, and Danny Ainge, and Dan Marley, and Frank Johnson, Tom Chambers, Kevin Johnson, very skilled team. They actually obviously lost to the Bulls 6 months later when the season was over. They lost to the Bulls in the spring of '93 in the NBA playoffs. So I was at camp. The last day of camp, they had to make some cuts. I was one of two guys. Brian Davis from Duke was also a rookie. He got cut, so I went home, and then I tried out for the lacrosse Catbirds in the CBA. And then my knee was bugging me. I'd already had 2 surgeries in high school, so this was already a grind. I was getting swollen, and I got arthritis and all that. And I'm 22 years old
Yeah.
at the time. So I ended up having my 3rd surgery, and then I kind of retooled and went to camp with the Clippers the summer of '93, and then was offered an opportunity, and the Pacers as well, the Indiana Pacers, was offered an opportunity to come back for fall camp. And just to condense it real quick, I got out there early and started lifting weights again and kind of running around. And then camp starts. They put you up in a hotel. You go to you take care of all your business. And with the Suns, it was up in Flagstaff, the preseason camp. It was down in Irvine with the Clippers. Just doing that, doing 2-a-days, sometimes 3-a-days. It's like, oh my gosh, I already had a bad knee. I had my 3rd surgery. I ended up having another one a couple years later on my right knee. Not a good thing, but I had a few times every fall where it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. Do I really want to do this? And I kept telling myself, I got to do it now, because if I say I'm done, I'm done. And I can't all of a sudden, come back from nothing. I didn't see that as being a real option for me. Maybe if I was, Shaq or something like that, they could certainly do that. But I was just happy to have the opportunity to do that. So I, kind of had to suck it up and say, okay, well, this is my time. It's sink or swim. So when you mentioned the word grind, college was a grind in different ways. Getting to try out for an NBA team, trying to make an NBA team. You got charter airplanes and everything. Everyone carries your bags, and you get this per diem and stuff like that. So it's like it was parts of it were easier, but parts of it, making the team, were certainly very challenging, because you got the best college players, drafted or not drafted, trying to make the team. And it's like, well, man, if I don't do this, I may not, my family may not eat. And I was single at the time. But I was fortunate, more through hard work than anything. I didn't have any, pictures of the coach or the GM that I could blackmail him with, or get anyone in trouble. Or just through kind of grit and taking care of what I could take care of and what I can control, was offered. I made the team the fall of '93 and '94 season, and then the following season, '94, '95. And so I played with the Clippers those 2 years. The second year wasn't a complete year, but Danny Manning, Loy Vaught, Stanley Roberts, and Elmore Spencer were the 2 centers on the team. Tom Tolbert, names that you may or may, basketball people certainly know these names. Not, you're a basketball guy.
Definitely.
But yeah, the lifestyle is vastly different. I just had I met a couple people at a cheap little apartment, bought a car, and just enjoyed being in LA. It was just it was another great time in my life that I look back at fondly and whatnot. But just the charter airplanes and everything's kind of laid out, and it's a grind, because the practices weren't that hard, because you play 82 games. You don't play 28 to 32 games. It's like you're playing a longer season, and you're playing a lot more games. So guys like myself were there to during practice, kind of be like the dummy, run the opposite, the opposing teams, running through some strategies. Say, okay, Bob, you're gonna, this is what you're gonna do during this practice to kind of get your starting player that you're backing up kind of ready to face David Robinson or Shaq or Olajuwon or Patrick Ewing. Do these type of things. Sometimes it might be shoot a right-handed hook shot, or that's all you're going to do. You do a crab dribble. You're going to try to dunk it. Rodman, you're going to be really aggressive. All you're going to do is focus on rebounding and maybe, getting a touchback or putback basket. But yeah, just having, it was just, the coaching wasn't necessarily any better. The camaraderie was a lot different, because, these guys got the Mercedes for the most part, and they got houses, and it's like, we're not living on campus. It's like you guys scatter out throughout the city. But yeah, it was vastly different than college. Like I said, I feel blessed then and now, or now as I do then, for different reasons. But yeah, just to have that opportunity, knowing that a lot of people thought, oh, he's gonna try out. Why would he try out? And I don't, I haven't given that stuff a lot of power over my mind. Maybe back then I did a little bit, but things have changed so much. But no, I just thankful for that opportunity and thankful that my hard work from the previous several years, including college, was rewarded with the opportunity to not only try out but to make the team and ultimately create the memories and have the memories of that I have win, lose, or draw at the professional level.
Who was your toughest matchup throughout your career? Who was the toughest player to guard?
Well, certainly like Olajuwon. I've been asked that question before, and Hakeem Olajuwon, obviously on offense and on defense, he's. I had an opportunity being a Western team to play against him a couple times and be on the court. There was one game that I started, and that was against the Utah. I'm sorry, that was against the Lakers. So I started. This is often a little tangent, but Sam Bowie was a center out there, and so I had one start. Obviously, among physical guys, Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason. These aren't guys that I necessarily guarded or was guarded by, but you can't help but run into these guys in the paint. You're going for a rebound. There's elbows and arms and hands, fists for that matter. Shaq, was there. Played against him once, and just as big as he is, he's not much taller than me, but just a big guy. Hearing stories of Stanley Roberts, who played with Shaq. He was 2 years older than Shaq, but at LSU, they had a heck of a front court with Shaquille O'Neal and Stanley Roberts. Stanley was a big guy, very powerful. And he used to tell stories that he used to, kind of punk Shaq in practice. But Stanley was a big guy and just a great guy, just like, I think Shaq probably would be. But Hakeem Olajuwon, his skill set, his footwork, David Robinson. I will humbly say that David Robinson was competing with Shaq when I was out there, one of the last games of the season. And I will say that I didn't guard him the whole time. And you might say that if I was on the court, I didn't guard him at all. But David Robinson was going for the scoring championship, and Shaq had maybe an off day or his season was done. Robinson, to his credit, another lefty, ended up scoring 71 points against us on our home court. And I didn't give up all 71 of those or anywhere near that, but I know I gave up a few of those. But David Robinson, a quick leaper, just a long, strong build. Great footwork and obviously a great shot as well. But yeah, those are some of the classic between lane cloggers and kind of just the highly skilled big men that were primarily back to the basket. Maybe Robinson might step out and shoot a 10, 12 footer. As could Olajuwon, they all could, but those are some fond memories of playing against some of what I would call the greats of the game, certainly in the last 20, 30 years, or 30, 40 years at this matter.
Yeah, you used to hear a lot about Olajuwon, but often I feel like David Robinson doesn't get that much talk as far as how great he was. And putting up 71 points, I mean, being able to do what he could do, I mean, I think they both were up there as far as probably really greats, both Olajuwon and David Robinson at that time.
Yeah, I mean, you can YouTube anything these days. I'm sure that all footage is uploaded. But yeah, those two guys were, and of course, like with Shaq and Patrick Ewing, they were more back to the basket and kind of strong guys. But yeah, Olajuwon and David Robinson certainly were kind of evolutionary in the sense that they had a different skill set, a better skill set, more tools in their bag to work with which to work, and they were very quick. I mean, great footwork and just highly skilled tall guys.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's something that even today's big man, if you're able just to add a few of those really small details when it comes to just the right footwork, and that really kind of separates yourself so much. So yeah, I mean, as far as wrapping up, not just really the conversation, but also your basketball career. I know now you're really big into more of the health side of things and the fitness side of things. And myself being a former athlete and talking to other former athletes, I think it's really important sustaining your health after your athletic career. So just talk a little bit about that. Not just those mandatory workouts that Coach Haskins and the
Right.
strength coaches and your NBA coaches had to push you through, but really keeping that mental capacity to stay focused on your health after sports. Talk a little bit about that and what you've done now, what you do now, and kind of advice for really continuing that for athletes.
So, I mean, athlete or not, I only know the role of an athlete, but I think just being active, I mean, I try to do that with my kids. My wife and I, we run a little bit. I've got a bad right knee, and it's not getting any better until I have it replaced. But my experience was my dad was a big guy who smoked for a long time. He wasn't active, and that had an impact on his life then. Of course, he passed away shortly after turning 68, but he developed cancer and stuff like that. That was back in 2010. Love him, great memories, but I don't want to be that guy. Now, granted, at the time, I wasn't always like watching my fitness because I thought, oh, I'm young, I'm going to live forever, I can eat whatever I want. Well, now I got to kind of watch it. So, 20 years ago, I was about 325 pounds, and it's like I just felt sedentary. I was stronger, and I was certainly strong at the time, lifting weights, eating every carb I could find, pancakes and waffles and spaghetti and all that kind of stuff. Didn't have a very balanced diet. But then I thought I'm going to try, and I hated running just because my knee has always been bad, even in high school before my first surgery. So I've had a bad knee for just called 35 to 40 years on my right knee. But I saw an article about a guy named Steve McMichael who played with the Bears, and he had like 11 surgeries on his knee. And he's like, I just can't do it. I did my time. And I read that one time, and it's like, you know what? I have to quit playing basketball. It's not worth it to me to not. I want to be active, and I don't want to have the burden of the extra weight that I saw my dad for a long time, his whole life basically, or my existence during his life, carry on. So I had gotten up through making some poor choices up to 325 pounds, and that was a little over 20 years ago. And it's like, okay, I need to get under 300. Let's start with that. And so trying to modify my diet a little bit and get more exercise, lift weights less, and I got it down to like 290, and then I got it down to 280. I was like, okay, this is good. I lost 40 pounds, being at 280, 285 pounds, which is where I sit right now, and that's a good weight for me. It's a different weight now than it was 15 to 18 years ago when I was 285 pounds because I'm stronger and I'm more aware of making healthy choices and doing healthy activities and trying to increase my own longevity. But no, I ran a marathon, Twin Cities Marathon in 2003. I checked that off my little mental bucket list. I never thought I would do that. I thought, well, I'm going to give it a shot.
Yes.
I haven't run another one. I did a few triathlons. You get in the water, you swim a quarter mile, you bike 10 to 15, 18 miles, and then you go run a 5K or whatever, 5 miles. Did a handful of those and just kind of felt really good. And it's like, you know what? That Twinkie might look really good and eating those ho-hos. And trust me, I still eat M&Ms and I still eat cookies. And I had 2 or 3 servings of ice cream last night. But part of it's, I don't want to sacrifice the quality of life and the fun stuff. I'm just more mindful of, okay, in moderation. And that should be for any of us. There's just such a significant benefit to me being a big guy, having a bad knee. If my knee swells up, life is miserable. I went for a bike ride, like I mentioned earlier, over the weekend for the first time since March 12th of 2016. Now I haven't, I've had my bike for however long. I hadn't gone on a bike ride because I've either been busy or my knee has been bothering me. But I'm staying active enough and keeping on top of it, lifting weights, and just trying to, um, you know, I changed for when anyone's on Instagram. I don't know who might see this, but BobMartin.fit, FIT. My name dot the word FIT is my Instagram, and I kind of changed it a while back, like I don't know, sometime last fall, because I really believe in fitness, and part of it's obviously up here, and part of it's below your neck, working your heart. I do push-ups every day. I started that in July 12th of 2016. My cousin Lance had sent out a little Facebook challenge, and I started doing that. And save for a couple times where I've had a wrist or a shoulder issue, I do push-ups every day. I do some core plank stuff every day. Once I get back into the gym, I kind of a freak about, not a freak about that, but I was setting my alarm for 4 in the morning to go to the gym. Then it was 3:30. Now it's like 2:30. Now it's not right now because the gym had closed down, Lifetime Fitness. But I never would have thought this 20 years ago. Here's me getting up 4 days a week at 2:30 in the morning, throw on my stuff, go to the gym, because with the family, it's hard to do that stuff after work. It's like a work day. I'm an insurance guy. I just keep too busy, and I've got little kids, and I don't have time or maybe the energy to do it in the evening. So I create that time and sacrifice a little bit of sleep, because it's that important to me. And then, trying to keep on top of my, again, I still eat plenty of bad things. I just mitigate some of the effects of that by eating. I've got a little health and wellness company that I work with, and I take, I do some cellular cleansing, my superfoods, and drink very, very high quality shakes, and do some other, bars and stuff like that. And that's been instrumental in getting me healthier heart and stomach and all that kind of stuff, and getting some abs, but also from a self-development, personal development standpoint, listening to podcasts, reading things, and just educating myself and helping educate other people about the benefits that I perceive, and sharing it with people that want to, they want to start to transform. And all of a sudden you get to the point where you kind of transcend into, man, I'm this person now, and I never would have seen this. And that's part of what I've felt. And it's fun to see that light go off when it goes off with people.
Yeah, for sure. I think that mental and physical aspect's important. That's the biggest thing, knowing that it's not just down here, but it's also up here as well.
Correct.
It's thing to push, and that's huge. And I think that's everybody needs to, something that everyone needs to know, athletes or not, like you mentioned earlier. Well, before we go, there's a last question here. Someone wanted to talk about the dog quilt you have there in the background before we end. I want to say, how many dogs you have back there? What's the story?
So it's not a quilt. My wife teaches English to kids in China. So that's the background. When she teaches, I'm on a computer here, and that's her background. So when she's teaching, it's kind of it's just I think it's actually a shower curtain. It's not technically a quilt. It's a shower curtain, just a fun shower curtain. And rather than having a plain background, she's teaching kids that are 4 to 10 years old how to speak English.
Okay.
She, she'll sit here, and she's got a whole bunch of these things, but she'll teach with these things on her head.
Yeah.
And she's got all these little props and stuff like that. So she does this to kind of keep a 5-year-old kid in China engaged, and kind of does this. And but the background is something, and these props are something that help her facilitate her teaching a little more effectively. So that's what that is back there. That's why it's there.
Well, we probably didn't expect that answer, but that's a great question. Probably the best question of the night.
Yeah, exactly.
No, Bob.
Any other questions? I know that there's any other questions over here. I didn't really look at it, but
no, it looks like we had a few comments. Ray Gaffney was a beast from Lance Oberding. Want to talk about?
Lance is my cousin, and Ray. I played with Ray 1 year, and Ray played pickup basketball early mornings with my cousin Lance in Ohio 15, 20 years ago. But Ray's about 3 or 4 years older than me. I haven't seen him forever.
For sure. We have Paul Prestis said hello to both of us.
Hey, Paul.
In here. Susie Martin, love you, Bob.
Oh, that's my wife. Love you too.
I'm glad she jumped in. Hopefully she heard and saw you giving your best impersonation of her teaching English.
Exactly.
Here. But yeah, it looks like all the comments we had there, but thanks for joining us, Bob. I know you said you talked about on Instagram you're BobMartin Fit now, so you're really promoting that. Where else can we follow you? Are you active on Instagram? Any other social channels?
Yeah, I just do Facebook, and I'm with kids. I kind of like lock that down a little bit, so it's not like I throw all Anyways, I'm not looking necessarily for anything. I don't tweet. In fact, tomorrow it'll be 10 years since I joined Twitter. I did one tweet in a class to learn about Twitter, and that's the last one that I did. So I haven't tweeted at all. But no, my Instagram, it's public. It's not that big of a deal. It's me, it's my wife, it's my kids, it's me working out. It's little things I observe here and there. But yeah, BobMartin.fit or /fit, FIT. That's kind of like the only real thing that I use. But yeah, the Facebook stuff, I get a few more friends on there, and it's kind of just little connections here and there,
For
a
sure.
little more personal stuff.
Yeah, one more from Lucy Martin. Hi from Mom.
Oh yeah. Hey Mom, how are you?
Yeah, and so we have that, and then actually did have one more. Actually, I just remembered here. I wanted to talk a little bit about. We talked a little bit about that era, the '90s basketball era, but just coming off the Last Dance documentary, I don't know how much you saw of it. I just wanted to talk just about that era and coming in during that Michael Jordan Bulls time. Really wanted to talk about a guy coming into the league during that time. Like you talked about, you understand LeBron and the impact he has on the league. I'm sure you saw more of the Kobe days and impact he had on the league. I want you to talk a little bit about the impact that Michael Jordan had on the league during that time, really coming into his own, winning his first couple championships your first years there.
Right. So going back a little bit further, I started watching when I don't know if it was Brent Musburger or who it was, but this is back when the graphics were awful, and the Lakers and the Celtics were huge rivals back in like '82. I didn't, and the 76ers, watching Andrew Toney, bought the Mo Cheeks, obviously Moses Malone, Charles Barkley. That's when I started getting into basketball, watching it, but I didn't play for a few years until a while after that. So getting into the NBA, I did meet Michael Jordan one time. It wasn't on the court when we didn't play him. He retired my first year, and then when we would have played them my next year, I was there for 2 seasons. We didn't play them at that point in the season when he came back. That was in '93, '94. So I haven't watched The Last Dance. Usually when our TV is on, it might be the local news very infrequently. It's a lot of animated stuff. It's Netflix. My kids watch, Disney this or Disney that. So I have not seen The Last Dance. I've seen some good stuff that kind of like the Fab Five thing. I'm sure it brings back a lot of great memories. And so, I've got to check it out. So I don't have a comment other than I want to watch The Last Dance for the very reason that I'm a fan of basketball. I respect Michael Jordan and what he did. But I didn't play against Michael Jordan, don't know him, and I met him very briefly as part of a team function when we played out at Northwestern. But yeah, I'm looking forward to checking that out. But I don't have ESPN or cable TV really. I got basic cable, I think, but we don't have ESPN, I don't believe. So that's something that I'll have to save that one for another time as far as opinions. But yeah, I mean, that was Michael Jordan. Obviously, watching his elevation from college into, and this is as a fan, watching them in college a little bit and hitting the game-winning shot back in whatever 83 or 84, and then watching some of the futility with Doug Collins, who happened to be the coach with the Bulls, and his talent and all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden really taking off and being like this basketball god that he, is not 60 some years old now, but that he's been revered to be, and his talents, you look at the greatest of that. I just don't think, I mean, he's obviously one or two when you look at Kobe and LeBron and Wilt Chamberlain. He's got to be up there because of winning 6 championships and never having lost in the finals. And, he had a pretty solid supporting cast, but, those guys were, Scottie Pippen and a bunch of, guys like you and me, Bill Wennington or Bill Cartwright. Bill Cartwright was talented. Dennis Rodman for a few years. But he was the ultimate with Kobe. Certainly, I would say the ultimate competitor. And he'd want to beat his grandma at checkers, and he'd want to beat anyone because, as I understand it, just that competitive with whatever basketball, baseball on the golf course. May not be elite at some of the other things, but throwing a little wager out there and being competitive. I think that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what a lot of people got from The Last Dance was that what he's willing to throw out there for that.
Right.
But no, that's cool to hear, and that's something I want to check in after you saw The Last Dance. Maybe some of your thoughts, some of the things that were going on, maybe some of the stuff you're surprised that was happening during that time. But really, really appreciate your time today. I think the last few, Kevin Ellich, great interview. I appreciate that, Kevin. He said Bob's a great guy and a true gentleman. So that's great.
Well, thank you.
That's great.
He doesn't know me very well
To talk about. Lucy Martin, again, talked in. How do you share this? Lucy, you can go onto the Golden Dunkers page. After this, it'll still be up. You can click share. You can follow it on there. It'll be posted on the Golden Dunkers YouTube channel as well. And then if you aren't able to find it after that, just figure out how to track down Bob or myself, and we'll be able to give you the link to share this. But that is for anyone who wants to share this. But Bob, appreciate your time today. Thanks for talking a little bit about hoops and everything going on.
Yeah, Kendall, thank you. I know we tried to schedule this a little bit. It took a little bit, but no, great to do this. You do a great job. I've watched a couple of them. You do a great job, and you know, with some great guys, some former basketball brothers, and it's fun to get a little byplay with some of the questions and stuff like that. I'll have to read the comments afterward, but no, I appreciate your time and taking taking me in as a guest. And any positive or negative feedback, you can private message me. Appreciate it. you or anyone else. But no, thanks for what you're doing, and we'll be in touch for sure.
For sure. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks again.
All right.
Have a good
too. Take care. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.